Writers, this is a brief presentation on successfully integrating a quote. Um, this is a skill I want you to really master in this class. A lot of people get tripped up when it comes to successfully quoting. So let's just start by saying that it's challenging. There's a lot going on when you do quote. Up front, you should tell the reader who the author is. You use a signal verb to set up the quote in the beginning using something like states. The punctuation needs to be accurate, and it's kind of weird the way it's set up, but the period comes after the internal citation. You share the page number. The quote connects with the works cited page, and you don't just haphazardly pick a quote. You pick a good one that illustrates your point, and the quote fits smoothly with the surrounding sentence structure. And you respond to the quote you have shared before moving on. You don't just give a quote and then move on to a new topic, but you share some commentary. And you know how and when to quote a group of words, a full sentence, or something longer. The quotes you choose should be current, relevant, authoritative, accurate, and have a purpose. So again, you're not just randomly choosing a statement, but it kind of fits this criteria. Uh, some common problems that people have when they do quote, I call this a drop and run, when they just throw out a quote without a lead in or an introduction or any commentary. So I kind of think of a successful quote in terms of a sandwich. That is, it has three parts. It has a lead in, it has the quote with the internal citation, and the bottom bun is commentary. Letting the quotation have the last word, which forces the reader to figure out the significance of the quotation. So, in other words, you give a quote, but you don't follow it up with commentary, or you quote information that would better be summarized or left out. All right, so the first part of the sandwich is the lead-in, and so you set up a quote by first giving attribution, mentioning where this quote's coming from, who wrote it, who they are, and what the title of the article is that the quote comes from, and then use a signal verb. So here's a number of signal verbs you could use. The most common one, I think, is state. And then after state, you go right into your quote. So you don't separate the quote into a separate sentence, but you have the lead in and the quote all run together. So here's some examples of what that looks like. So here we have the lead in as writer, Eudora Welty notes, and here we have the quote, and it's divided up into two parts, and here's the way that it ends. Notice the structure, the end quotation, the internal citation, and parentheses, no PG or P for page, and then the punctuation, the period at the very end. First half is your writing up here, and the second half is their writing. Tell the reader who you are quoting with a short signal phrase lead in. So here's another example. According to Paul Smith, researcher at UCLA, that's our lead in. Then we run right into the quote, internal citation, and punctuation. If you choose not to introduce the author in the beginning, you must include his or her name at the end, like this. Follow the citation with a period. Here's another example of a lead in and then a longer quote and then the internal citation. Again, the punctuation is a little screwy, but this is how it looks. Okay, so this is important. So here we're referencing the writer a second time. So let me back up a bit. So here we mentioned John Preston, and we give a quote from this theater critic. But then, so this is the first mention. Notice we give the first and last name. First and last name always when you first mention a writer. But thereafter, you just reference the writer using the last name, so you don't need to be redundant. The reader knows who this person is, so you just use the last name. Preston suggests. Last name used after first mention. Okay, and then the last part is commentary. I think this is probably the most important part. It's your chance to share your own thoughts of your reaction to what this writer says. So there's a number of different ways you can go about giving commentary. You can put their words into your own words, or you can explain why you agree or disagree. Um, you can paraphrase the quotation, or you can draw readers' attention to significant words and phrases by quoting them in your own sentence. Here's kind of a lengthy example of all three parts. You have the lead-in, the quote, and then the commentary. Notice how the writer begins the commentary in other words, and they put the quote into their own words. Okay, here's a couple true or false questions. The example below shows a quote that has a successful lead-in. Andy Warhol was a 20th century American artist, period. And then we have the quote here. So it's not a successful lead-in, it's false because these two parts don't run together. So again, the lead-in and the quote should just be one sentence. All right, and so here is an example of what I'm talking about. So here you have a successful lead-in that runs right into the quote. True or false? After you quote, you don't need to respond to the quote by elaborating on, commenting on, or interpreting it. You could move on to a new point. That would be a big false. You always want to follow up a quote with commentary, sharing your own thoughts or interpretations. All right, I hope this helps. Just remember, when you quote, you have to have these three parts that are important. You have to have a lead in, the quote with internal citation, and commentary that has depth. All right. Thank you.